From the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, winner of the 2017 Southern Oregon Television Award for Program of the Year and the Best Education Show. Ramping Up Your English is an educational support program for intermediate English learners. It's a program for people from all language backgrounds. Ramping Up Your English is also for people of all ages. If you've already passed the beginning stages of learning English and want to reach higher levels of proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our current thematic unit is animals. This is segment 1 of episode 73. In this episode, we focus again on birds. Now, you may wonder, how can birds help you reach higher levels of English proficiency? Well, there are birds that talk. Parrots are a good example. They say what they're trained to say in any language. However, it's unlikely that a parrot can help you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Now, our study of birds and other animals using the power of television and the internet includes higher level English supported by the context of an academic unit. As your vocabulary and knowledge of animals increases, you're able to add knowledge, include the patterns of English grammar and usage that ramp up your English communication skills. So in that way, birds are helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Now about those parrots. In English, we have a saying for someone who lacks intelligence. Such a person is sometimes called a bird brain, by rude people, of course. Well, first of all, I don't think any good comes from insulting people. But I also have to question the validity of that insult. Researchers are discovering levels of intelligence among birds that stand the bird brain insult on its head. Considerable research has been carried out on parrots. These birds rank high on intelligence testing. Let's learn more about parrots from Julianne Rose of Wildlife Safari in Winston, Oregon.
Parrots, the birds that talk. These tropical birds have been researched for years, revealing their high levels of intelligence. One researcher found that each parrot speaks its own unique iteration, like saying its name. When another parrot hears that, it repeats the exact sound. It's its way of saying it received the sending bird's message. Julianne Rose of Wildlife Safari tells us that it's not just about repeating our language.
For their words and their mimicry, but Amazons, they're not so much about words as they are about noises and mimicking sounds that they hear. So he'll do a really great car alarm and a siren. He can mimic the noises of some other birds. And he'll also whistle a variety of songs. I would say that one of the communication methods that he uses the most is whistling. And he'll whistle back and forth with us in the office while we're doing paperwork and writing programs. But he definitely is an animal that would not make a good pet. He is a stunning bird, but he requires a lot of stimulation and a lot of socialization to be happy. Since he is so smart, scientists think he's got the same brain power as a human kindergarten student would. He needs a lot to do. So he'll do a lot of exploration of his environment with his beak and his tongue here. Lots of shredding, sticking his head in things and nibbling and chewing. He does a lot of picking apart of fabric and leather pieces and beads. Beads are definitely a toy that he seems to prefer more over everything else. And he also needs a lot of activity going on around him. So in the wild, he would live in a flock of easily 100 to 200 birds. So in captivity, the people that are around him on a day-to-day basis, they become his flock. So it's really important for us as his keepers that we are making sure that He gets a lot of socializing time with us and out and about in the park. So he goes on a lot of programs with us. As you can see, he is quite content to be here. We didn't have to talk him into it at all. He'll come to meetings with us, he'll come to schools, and he is really just a fun animal to bring out to meet people because he has such an engaging personality. And these guys in the wild, for the most part, they're doing well. They do unfortunately face some pressure from illegal capture for the pet trade. And it is important, if you ever do decide you're going to have a pet bird, I would recommend a parakeet. They're quite a bit easier than parrots like this guy. You make sure that they have a band. That way you can track which breeder they came from and you know for sure that they haven't been pulled illegally from the wilds. He is an animal that's going to eat quite a bit of different foods. He is very much a fruit and a vegetable and a nut eater. And this beak here that he has is specialized for cracking into particularly hard or tough foods. And his feet down here, he has 2 toes in the front and 2 toes in the back, and they bend to form a little cup almost so he can hold on to food and bring it up towards his beak and nibble on it. And he's a super, super messy eater, which in captivity, not so fantastic, but in the wild, him being a messy eater is very, very important because he'll pick up, let's say, a piece of fruit, take a couple bites, throw it on the ground, and then that fruit on the ground will become food for animals that aren't able to climb high up into the canopy. And it also can grow and start new trees, which will feed other animals for generations to come. So they have a super important role in the ecosystem.
Julianne Rose and the parrot Boo appeared on Adventures in Education in 2016.
Now, how are those birds doing in the wild? Are they endangered, or are they in pretty good population?
There are a few that are endangered. For the most part, parrots are stable for the moment, but they do feel a lot of pressure from the pet trade. Unfortunately, especially in their home countries, there are a lot of individuals who will go out and collect them right out of the nest illegally and then try to sell them to tourists or wealthier individuals that live in the country.
I see.
So the takeaway is that parrots are not a good choice for a pet.
Another misleading saying in English is when someone is said to eat like a bird. That phrase means the person eats very little. The truth is that birds eat a great amount of food in relation to their body mass. They have to in order to maintain their body heat. Like us, birds are warm-blooded. We could never eat as much as birds do, considering the ratio of the mass of their bodies, not even the most gluttonous among us. When birds watch us, do you ever wonder what they think of these warm-blooded beings that don't fly? Maybe they insult other birds by calling them human brains. I had nothing but admiration for a lone seagull I watched with my wife Liz at Monterey Bay. You'll meet this seagull along with other ocean life teeming along the fishing pier overlooking a small sand beach in this video that ends segment 1 of episode 73. We'll be back with segment 2 right after this.
Watching birds at Monterey Bay, California, we saw these curlews finding food in the sand with their long, skinny bills. When this seagull crashed their party, it found a crab to eat. This individual seemed better provided than this swirling flock of seagulls. They seem highly excited about something below in the water. They're seeking a meal and somehow not flying into one another as they fly in these formations. This gull seemed to be content to be away from all that swirling action. To Liz and me, it seemed to know what it was doing. It confidently advanced into the water, not having to compete with other gulls for food. And food is exactly what it came up with. But what is this animal it's eating? We thought we saw that it was a crab at first. Then immediately I announced that it was a crawfish, But looking closer, we see that it's neither of those. It's some kind of crustacean, though. The gull swallowed it whole, then went back in the water and instantly came up with another one. Far from the maddening crowd, this seagull seems to have found the mother lode of this shrimpy, crawfishy creature, and it didn't mind dining alone. With its slightly curved beak, the gull tears the prey apart. It seems to prefer the main body of this creature. She carried the crustacean out of the advancing water and ate it whole. Then she wasted no time going back into the water and again came up with the same creature. This is not a gull that needs to learn how to fish. I've often seen seagulls steal food from the mouth of a flock member. Perhaps that's why this one chooses to dine alone. This one was so successful in finding food, we began to worry that it would overeat, like eat itself sick. Well, maybe it's a mom who'll regurgitate some of this food for her chick, hidden away somewhere. Other seagulls were close by, but none of them bothered her, nor did they seem as successful in finding food. This seagull led our eyes to a group of them assembled on the beach. Seagulls are expert flyers. Their wings are long in comparison to their bodies, and the shape is a factor, the tapered ends helping them make sharp turns in the air. Looking down on the bay, these seagulls had much to be excited about. The water was teeming with life, like this jelly. I know I was excited. This was way larger than the jellies I'd seen before in Alaska. Now our eyes were drawn to this bright creature. Isn't this the same crustacean that the seagull was gorging on earlier? I suppose that people living in Monterey know the name of this crustacean. There were certainly a lot of them in the water. Let's watch what this one does. Then we saw this. Thousands, if not millions, of these tiny, immature fish. They swam together just under the surface of the water, clustered in schools, all swimming in the same direction. And right there among them was the orange thing. Perhaps they were food for the crustaceans. So we were seeing a food chain right before our eyes. We weren't the only ones seeing the large mats of tiny fish and the orange creature. This grebe was finding plenty of food to dive for. It looks as if these fish still had external gills. They were of little interest to this curlew. The curlew's very long, skinny, curved beak is an adaptation for getting a totally different kind of meal. The curlew seeks tiny creatures living in the sand. Back to the solitary seagull that's such a successful hunter, we expected to see her eat more of those orange creatures. Again she advanced out into the bay. We wondered how many had she eaten while we were focused on other life in the bay. Suddenly she flew up into the air. She did what seagulls do best. She flew. When a gull flies over the sea, it's called a seagull. When it flies over the bay, is it called a baygull? There are many species of seagulls, all of them having incredible flying ability. No wonder writer Richard Bach chose this bird for his work, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Plenty of inspiration here.
You're watching Ramping Up Your English. This is segment 2 of episode 73. Now, watching the previous video, I think that was a crawfish the girl was eating. You know, I've seen my share in Louisiana, but they were always crawling somewhere. I don't remember seeing them swim. Well, whatever it was, there was plenty of them, and we only saw that particular gull eating them.
Bird watching can be very rewarding, and it's the fastest growing pastime according to some people. There are plenty of gulls for these boys to watch, but notice where they're pointing their binoculars. They're checking out the white pelicans. There are plenty of birds here for watching. The binoculars are pointed toward the seagulls, but another white pelican glides in, stealing the show. Other birds are flying around as well. It takes some skill to adjust binoculars for a focused view, but the results are well worth the effort. The kids were at the edge of the water, right where some of the most interesting birds are found. One type of bird that's encountered near water is the cormorant. Cormorants are graceful flyers when skimming the water like this one on the Columbia River, but they also move well underwater, where they dive for fish, eels, and water snakes. Cormorants are found near water for obvious reasons, considering their diet, but they're only found in coastal and inland waterways. They build communal nests in such places, much like herons. Here we see a cormorant carrying a stick with which to build or add to a nest. Even when not nesting, it's not unusual to see cormorants grouped together. The ancestors of cormorants date back to the days when dinosaurs lived on Earth. The earliest known modern bird had the body structure of a cormorant. If you're around a body of water long enough, you're likely to see a cormorant, and they're easy to identify by the behavior you see here. Cormorants spread their wings like this to dry their feathers, especially after a dive into the water to catch a meal. Cormorants are not the only birds diving into the water for fish. These Arctic terns make dramatic dives when the payoff is food. They may not dive as deep as a cormorant, but they sure put on quite a show when they're in a feeding frenzy, like these terns. These scoters are only one of two species of birds with completely white bills. They're examples of waterfowl, and they are built similar to coots, only slightly larger. Scoters are often found in open water. I saw these in the Pacific Ocean at the Oregon coast. I saw others in the Salish Sea near the San Juan Islands. On both occasions, the scoters were close to shore, like this rocky shore in Oregon. The beach is where you can find marine birds and shore birds together. Some spend their days out to sea, diving for food, then retire to the beach at the end of the day. These birds at Cannon Beach in Oregon gather at dusk. The long stilty legs and very skinny long beak equip these shorebirds for their habitat. As noted in a previous episode, birds, especially a diversity of bird species, tells us a great deal about the health of the environment. Scientists use data about bird populations in their studies of the ecosystem. Other people watch them for the sheer joy of it. With so many birds out during the day, there's no reason to miss out on the avian life that surrounds us. With little effort and a pair of binoculars, we can observe and learn about these animals on the wing. Like these children, you don't have to be an expert on birds to enjoy watching them.
Speaking of watching birds, we'll do more of that when we return.
Getaway, getaway now. Getaway, getaway, getaway now. Take a plane, take a train, take a car. Just getaway, getaway, getaway now. Too far, just getaway, getaway, getaway now.
Hi, I'm Regina Ayers and the host of Getaway Girl. Join me to learn how travel can open you up to new people, new experiences, and new inspirations. You can take on a new persona when you travel, lighter, freer, more willing to be spontaneous and able to just go with the flow. I know I do. You can join me and travel around the world. Uganda and Rwanda to see the great apes, Netherlands to see Amsterdam from the canals, see Cuba and Havana and the countryside, or travel to Myanmar to see the temples of Old Bagan, Russia to walk the streets of Moscow. Join me soon for Getaway Girl.
Getaway, getaway, getaway now. Getaway, getaway, getaway now. Take a plane, take a train, take a car. Just getaway, getaway, getaway now. Need to be far, just getaway, getaway, getaway now.
You're watching Ramping Up Your English. This is segment 3 of episode 73. Our content-based unit is animals, and this episode is all about birds. Now, perhaps the most well-known bird in the world is the chicken. Now, this book is entitled Chickens Aren't the Only Ones. It has a lot of general information about birds in an easy-to-read format. If you haven't heard about the chicken, you're still likely to have seen an egg. Now, people have asked since time immemorial which came first, the chicken or the egg. I'll let you ponder that one. It would be a great subject for an English conversation group. Now, I suppose you could also ask, what would happen if I smashed this egg in a frying pan or threw it up and let it land there? Well, unlike the first question, I know just how to answer this one. Let's take a look at the egg. Didn't make as big a mess as you predicted, right? That's because this egg was boiled first. You can also fry, scramble, or poach an egg. Okay, so enough about the egg. Let's get back to birds. When it comes to more detailed information about birds, a great source is Cornell University. Their research on birds is substantial, and they make this knowledge available to the public. Visit their website. Now, much of the photography you've enjoyed in today's episodes is from Cal Holman. I was on a cruise on the Columbia and Snake Rivers with Holman, and he took some great images of birds along those rivers. You can see more of his work at his website, calholmanphotography.com. Now, while I like to showcase video that I've captured, many of the video clips featured in this episode are from Video Blocks, a subscription stock video service for producers. They sell video clips to TV and video producers like me. Now, speaking of bird video and images, remember that one part of the animal report you're writing is the description of your animal. A good still image will give you time to note the appearance of your animal in detail, giving you a time to look repeatedly at the same animal and note its shape, color, body parts, and similar familiar animals with which to compare it. Now, video clips can show your subject in motion and demonstrate its movements. You can often see examples of your animal's behavior through this, watching video clips of your subject. If the subject of your report is a bird, you probably want to include the sounds it makes. Now, the sound a bird makes is often called its song, and the song of this bird has a certain rhythm. One common sound of small birds is described as chirping. That word has more to do with the pitch of the song than with the rhythm. The rhythm and the pitch together is usually distinct enough that someone with a trained ear can identify a bird without even seeing it. Birds chirping together can create quite a racket, like these chirping in a spruce tree. Cornell University has audio files of birds. By visiting their website, you can listen to the iterations of various birds, possibly the bird that you're researching. Now, if you were describing this bird, what would you write or say about the shape of its beak? How about the shape and color?
While this isn't a still image, the birds are in view long enough to answer those questions. What familiar bird does it remind you of? This bird stays still long enough for an accurate description. Its color, the shape of its bill, and its appearance similar to a familiar bird. Plus, you could describe how it moves on land.
Now, while this bird, this one you can see it's moving in place while preening. Again, there are plenty of details visible for a description, plus the behavior of its preening and the hints about its habitat as you see there. So in a future episode, I'll review all the aspects of the report you're doing on your chosen animal. Plus, I'll post which episodes correspond to each aspect of your report on my website, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen very soon. In our next episode, we'll return to Africa, featuring an interview with a special guest. Now, if you love chimpanzees and gorillas and other megafauna of Africa, you won't want to miss episode 74. I'd love to hear from you and see how you're progressing with this program. Send an email to letscreatepro@gmail.com. Visit my website, letscreate.org, for all the support materials for this episode. Just navigate to the episode 73 page. You can watch and even download all the episodes of Ramping Up Your English at archive.org/details/roguetv. Use the search box by entering Ramping Up Your English. You'll find all the episodes there. Ramping Up Your English can be seen in Ashland on Channel 15 or 115 of the Ashland Home Network, and in the rest of Southern Oregon on Charter Cable Channel 182. Showtimes are 8 a.m. on Mondays and 7:30 p.m. on Thursdays. Visit rvtv.sou.edu for free live streaming. Showtimes will vary in different areas. Check your local public access and education stations. I want to thank my director, Lynn Lyken, and my talented and dedicated crew, and I want to thank you, our viewers. All of you helped make this program an award winner. Join us next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roguetv. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.